Thank you for your enthusiastic response to Restoring Health Holistically. I would just like to make clear that I am not a medical practitioner. In order to heal my own illness over the past 17 years, I've become a holistic health author, educator, and an advocate. But this does not provide the depth of knowledge that's needed to treat illnesses. I research any illness I have, and then I make an appointment with a holistically trained practitioner to discuss a treatment plan. And this is a collaboration between you and your doctor. Western medicine primarily treats symptoms with drugs forever. I prefer to seek practitioners who are trained to treat the causes of illness so that I will get well. The titles that I look for are naturopathic doctor, or ND, functional MDs, orthomolecular doctors, chiropractic neurologists, and certified energy medicine practitioners. These TV shows are intended to raise consumer awareness of holistic treatments and explain how they work so that you can make informed decisions and find a practitioner to work with and get well. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Gracelyn Guyol, and welcome to Restoring Health Holistically. After 3 years of interviewing holistic practitioners on this series, you now get a chance to ask me questions. And so this season is being called Ask Gracelyn. You can ask questions about me personally, or you can ask questions, health questions that you have. And we ask that you go to my website or my Facebook page, which is Holistic Healing with Gracelyn, and the administrator of that page is Lois Arias.
Hello.
Which is here with me today, and she's going to read the questions that have been submitted, and then I'm going to answer them. And this is going to go on for this whole fall season. So there's still plenty of time for you, and the Facebook page will be put up on the screen later. So grab a pen and paper if you want to make notes and you've submitted a question. We occasionally give websites that you might want to write down for reference. So welcome, Lois.
Thank you, Gracelyn. It's great to be here with you again. I think first I'd like to go over what your background is. What made you want to do this and drew you to it?
Well, I have no science training at all, and I had I'm a communications major, and so I had no training in the scientific world at all, didn't even take high school chemistry. But, you know, mother is need is the mother of invention. And so in the 1995-96, I began growing breast cysts and tumors really rapidly. And I was frightened because every time they were cut out, more would appear. And so I was worried about they were benign, but I was really worried about the threat of cancer. And so fortunately, I love to read. And so I've been an avid reader all my life, and I just dove into books and trying to figure out what could cause cancer. And so I became an expert in chemicals and environmental causes. And then I went to a naturopathic doctor who's trained to heal all illnesses without drugs, and asked if she could help me figure out the cause. And so that embarked me on 17 years of studying and using holistic medicine. So that's how I got on this path, but I've been on it a very long time. And after writing 2 books and giving 7-hour lectures for medical practitioners and serving on the Connecticut Children's Mental Health Task Force to help recommend holistic treatments for children, I've learned a great deal, and I'm very happy to share it with other people to help them find their own path.
And I'd like to congratulate you. You were just nominated to belong to a very prestigious group.
Yes, the National Association of Professional Women, and that was a nice honor.
Well, I think it's one you deserve.
Thanks.
I'm not biased, though. Okay, what is homeopathy? We touched on it before, but what is it and how is it different from holistic or alternative medicine?
It is a unique treatment system that was developed 250 years ago by a brilliant German genius who at that time in history looked at the way that patients were being treated, and they were basically being bloodlet and a lot of treatments that we now look at scornfully, but that was the state of the medical art at that time. But he observed that they seemed to hurt the patients more than they helped them, and then he considered them barbaric, and so he wanted no part of that. And he spoke about 9 languages, as I recall, and he translated ancient texts. That was his business. So he was just a really brilliant man. And he went back to Hippocrates and said, first, do no harm. And so he began exploring healthier ways of healing people. And it took a lot of years, but he discovered that when a natural substance caused certain symptoms, that if you treated those symptoms, let's see, it's like causes treats like. So something that caused that symptom could be used to treat those symptoms. And it was a very complex undertaking, but he went over years and found things that if you had boils, something that would cause boils would effectively treat those boils. Then he would put it into a dilution where that it would be a minute amount, because in those days people thought if someone told them to take a teaspoon of a treatment, a remedy, that 5 times that, 10 times that must certainly be better. And we still have a little bit of that in human nature today. If they tell you to take, a small amount of something, you think, well, if I take it 3 times a day, maybe I'll get better faster, or it'll be better. So there was that issue. So he tried to dilute these treatments to very, very fine dilutions so that if people overdosed, they wouldn't get sick. And so he developed this into the homeopathic treatment today. And the homeopathic treatments were so effective that before the turn of the 20th century, in the late 1800s, homeopathic medicine was the most effective thing that had been found. And I believe that the first hospital in the United States was a homeopathic hospital. And all of the wealthy were using homeopathic treatments because it was the latest, most innovative thing, and was probably a time when people could not afford treatments of most types. The homeopathic remedies today went out of fashion because they take a little bit of time in general, for them to elicit change in the body. And so when you had drugs and come on in the early 1900s, antibiotics in particular, that would end things that were killing people, and that there were no treatments for it at that time other than antibiotics. Those were really swung everything into looking for magical drugs or treatments like that. And so homeopathy went out of favor in this country over the next
But not
50 years, but not in Europe.
No.
And in other countries, because it's inexpensive and it's quite effective and it's not dangerous. And so what happened in the United States is in the 1970s, several men practitioners in the San Francisco Bay Area decided to try and rejuvenate the use of homeopathy in the United States. The scientific argument against homeopathy was that these remedies, and they're called remedies, not medicines or
Cures.
They're called remedies still from their ancient calling. That scientists would do an analysis in, say, in the 1950s of homeopathic remedies, and they couldn't find a single indication of the original treatment substance in the remedies. So they just said, well, this is hogwash, this is fraud. There's not a trace of this original recipe in there. But people observed that they brought about change. And they didn't, and there were no, not the right powerful equipment enough to look at those. And it wasn't until, I can't remember the dates, but it was relatively recently, I think it was in the 1980s, mid 80s, that with the high-powered magnification equipment that we have today, microscopes and stuff, that a doctor observed that the way that homeopathic medicines are made resembles the the manufacture of nanoparticles. And nanoparticles in medicine today are sort of a new hot thing because they're really tiny and you can get them into places that you can't get other things in, and they can be naturally derived, and they have amazing effects, but it's still new. So it's sort of a hot new area of research. But they tested homeopathic remedies and went to where they were manufactured. And in fact, what was happening is that over 100 years ago, they were actually manufacturing nanoparticles. And so they found that homeopathic remedies have nanoparticles of the original source in them, and that's what is triggering the healing effect in the human body. And so this is opening up a lot of new research. The thing that I recommend them for is because a lot of people come to me, especially those with mental illnesses who have not been able to work, they're living on disability. If they're bipolar or one of the mental disorders where people tend to act out a lot or behave badly when they're under that, having a session of that, they are, they're very affordable. They're inexpensive because people like that have burned through family money sometimes. They've burned through friends and family so that no one's stepping forward to help them. They have no resources financially. And homeopathy, other than paying to see the homeopathic practitioner, the remedies are very inexpensive. It's like $5 or $7 for a remedy that you take for a month. So this is a very inexpensive, effective, natural way of dealing with sometimes very serious disorders. And it works. I know 2 people in my first book that used homeopathic remedies for their bipolar treatment. And so it's something that was poo-pooed for many years by science, but now science has finally caught up with what everyone has observed is that these work, and that they're now known to have nanoparticles. And that's what's causing the change in the human body. So it's very exciting, sort of a new leaf on an old cure. And so I suggest that people who have serious illnesses, mental or physical illnesses, look up a homeopathic, homeopathic remedies, and find a doctor. There are homeopathic practitioners who are licensed and certified. There are also many medical doctors. Naturopathic doctors, NDs, are all trained in homeopathic medicine. Some of them choose to specialize in it and get additional training. Others use the training that came as part of their medical training and their schooling. So I encourage people, if you have limited resources and you have medical problems, see a homeopathic practitioner, because it does work. How they do is they listen to all of your symptoms, in all parts of your body, and then they give you one remedy, usually one remedy to treat everything, and you need to take it as they direct, and gradually over time you'll begin to see changes occur. And some people, it can be immediate changes perceived, I'm told. In other people, the ones that were in my book, it took them a month or so, and then it took maybe 6 months to see dramatic improvement in their bipolar symptoms and a reduction of that. So it will vary with the problem, and it will vary with the treatment, but it is an effective alternative form that is quite affordable and proven through time, and is used widely in Europe as an alternative.
Okay, I'm going to go out of order here now
Okay.
because I think it'll fit in.
Okay.
And that is about a hot topic these days. What do you think about immunization?
I think that some immunizations are really important. In childhood, you know, they have really dealt with a lot of the major illnesses of childhood by not having them through immunization, and I think that that's appropriate. But I am really concerned about the push for every year everybody getting flu vaccinations. And the pharmaceutical industries, the reality of that industry is that a lot of their medications are going off patent. So they're becoming generic. So they're looking for new income sources. So they're pushing every immunization they can think of. And now you have children who are, before the age of 2, are getting 32 different immunizations. And their systems are not developed. They have a toxic load already that they've inherited from the mother and from our lifestyle. And their organs and their systems are not up to dealing with more chemicals. And so I think a lot of these are being pushed for profit. And and some, up until I think it was, maybe it was 2004, I'm not certain on the date, but prior to a recent date, and the outcry from mothers of autistic children, immunizations had mercury as a preservative in them. So we now know that mercury is highly toxic. We're all carrying somewhat of a load. If you eat fish, you have mercury in your system. If you have dental amalgams, they're 50% mercury, and outgassing in your mouth. And so a lot of things that we're seeing as fixes are now seen as toxins. And that's happening in the immunization field too. So I talk to naturopathic doctors who are mothers too, and I say, what do you do? And they say, we choose the immunizations very carefully, and we don't do all of them that are being recommended because we don't think that that's appropriate for this young, small body weight, undeveloped human being to have their systems be challenged with that much. So I would say to new parents, consult doctors who are trained to use holistically. They will recommend some of the things, the immunizations they think are appropriate. For adults, I never get a flu vaccine. It's widely known that the mineral selenium is a very potent antiviral. It's used for HIV patients. It's used in a lot of severe viral challenges. And you should, in your daily multivitamin mineral, you should have a small amount of selenium. It's a natural element that's found in the soil, but not in all of the soils everywhere. So it used to be commonly found in foods. The plants would take up selenium, and you would get selenium, traces of selenium in the foods that were grown in those soils. But that's not the case, and we're doing so much, buy so much of our food from agribusiness where there's not much left in the soil that hasn't been put on there. So I look for in my daily multivitamin and mineral, I look for 200 micrograms of selenium. And then I buy capsules of 200 micrograms of selenium, and I carry them with me when I travel. If I'm at a party, if I'm on a plane, if I'm anywhere where I'm liable to come across viruses, planes are really bad because they don't filter the air like they used to. So I'll take a couple of those extra a day just to give my body plenty of selenium to fight off any invaders. If you're fighting viruses on an ongoing basis, then take more, but you have to be careful not to take too much, because it can cause, overload is always bad. And so that's my take on, I don't do shots, vaccinations myself. My immune system is pretty sturdy, and I have many alternative ways of fighting off, boosting my immune system through eating garlic and broccoli and taking additional selenium. That there are alternative ways that are much safer than the immunizations.
That was an excellent answer. Okay, I'm going to go back in order now.
Okay.
Do you base someone's needs for vitamins and supplements on blood tests or on a physical exam?
Well, I think you need to have both. When you go, you need to have an annual physical. If you don't have any pressing issues, it's just to check in with your doctor and ask questions and let them ask questions and let them run some blood work. Annual blood work, if you can afford it, if your insurance will pay for it, is really very helpful because it allows your doctor to spot things that maybe are going out of balance. And the human body, balance is what you're striving for, what it's striving for, homeostasis. And so if when you're seeking treatment for a mental illness, I suggest that you specifically get the blood work that the naturopathic doctor will recommend. They will look for specific vitamin and mineral levels. They will look at things that can be deficient, that are commonly deficiencies associated with causing mental illnesses or making them worse, such as low vitamin D, lack of essential fatty acids in the system. So we have the lab tests for determining a lot of the common causes. And the thing that put me off a bit about psychiatrists is that we have all of these resources, and we know that when certain things are out of balance, the brain goes out of balance. And when you go to a psychiatrist, you never got any medical lab testing at all.
No.
It was all very subjective, and it changed from doctor to doctor because they just asked you what your symptoms were. Well, you're the doctor and you're an MD. You should be helping me figure out, I can tell you the symptoms, but you need to give a little more effort to defining what's the cause and not just randomly picking something that fits your symptoms because that's convenient and saves time.
And it keeps you from having a female patient with too many questions. Because we're not always treated the same.
That's right. We're not always given the respect that we deserve, and we're beginning to
we're
say...
We're going to get it.
We need it, right.
Okay.
So I believe in blood tests. I know some people can't afford it, but if you go to naturopathic doctors, they're very aware of what's affordable and what's not, and they'll work with you to get the things to help you, if you can't afford it all, to get the things that are most important in the order of importance. So, okay.
How do you feel about genetic testing for adults?
This is still sort of a new field for medicine, and so I think there's a great deal of excitement, and there's a bit of a bandwagon thing on this where you should get all this genetic testing. I had one friend that went to a doctor who was, what do these new doctors call themselves? It's an MD, but they call themselves something else. And because they're doing holistic practices, and I've forgotten the title of it. But anyways, he ordered all of these tests, and it was $5,000 worth of tests. And I just don't believe that we've arrived at a point in genetics where they know how to interpret all of this data that effectively. And so I thought that was not called for, and it was way overload, and so I felt that she had been used as a cash cow.
Yeah.
But I do think, you said you had your son tested for genetic...
but that was because I have celiac.
Yes, and so I think it's very appropriate, and I think there are certain types of cancer. If you have a certain type of cancer and they want to verify it or check you for the types that are known, I think it's appropriate, and it's a wonderful new field that's opening up. I just feel like that you need to be cautious about what you agree to have done and listen and question, because sometimes it can be used to produce revenue for a doctor who is putting children through college or something. So it's an exciting new field, and I think it has tremendous value especially in cancer and serious illnesses. But I think that buyer beware.
As I said, we've done it once, and it was based on his meal plan at college.
Well, and I was tested for genetic errors, but these were observed inherited errors. It wasn't the kind of genetic testing they're doing today. In the 1950s, there were doctors running a residential psychiatric facility in Canada that were both psychiatrists, and 75% of the beds in this hospital were filled with schizophrenic patients because there was no known way to treat them outside of this, just putting them in a place to keep them safe from themselves and other people. So the psychiatric meds were just beginning to come on stream, and there was nothing that really helped then or now the schizophrenia. But these doctors were trained in basic chemistry and biochemistry. And so what they began to develop was an effective treatment, holistic treatment for schizophrenia. It was Dr. Abram Hoffer and his colleague that worked with him, and they ran this hospital for many years. And so they observed that when they tested the urine of patients, they observed that sometimes the urine turned a mauve purple, and they tried to figure out what that meant. And they learned that it meant that this person had an inherited error that is today called pyroluria disorder, that caused their bodies to be deficient in zinc and vitamin B6. And then they went on to make other discoveries of inherited errors of metabolism. And those I described, there are 4 of them that they discovered at this hospital, and then were studied and advanced by a select few of doctors in the United States in the years since then. And these are called orthomolecular medical practitioners. And orthomolecular means right molecule. And so they discovered that if you found the deficiencies and you gave that patient the right natural molecule, it could treat some of these errors, inherited errors. And so when I'm looking for doctors, I prefer naturopathic doctors because they're more available in the United States, and and they can treat all of your illnesses. But these orthomolecular practitioners, or those who've taken that, they've had conferences, orthomolecular medical conferences in Canada for 40 years. And you can treat all medical illnesses, but you need to go to the annual conference and learn the latest and have these doctors that have been trained this way teach you. So they're less easy to find in the United States, but I always search for them because of this specialized training for mental illnesses. So these are inherited errors that nowadays they probably will be able to tell you the genetics of it. But in 1998, I was tested for inherited errors that were known because of the work of these Canadian doctors. And I had 2 of the 4. And when I got the right molecule to supplement my system, because they cause deficiencies in the system of certain things, and took those molecules, that's when my mania disappeared in 4 months. And it took longer to figure out that the fish oil deficiency of essential fatty acids was causing my depression. But my mania and depression were 2 different causes. Mm-hmm. And so it is possible to heal mental illnesses because a lot of them have these 4 inherited errors that are not known by MD training today. And so they're only known, some naturopathic doctors, if they've been schooled recently, know about them. But that's why I put them in both of my books, so that people will know that they are now available online. You can get lab testing, and you can get doctors to help tell you what to do about those deficiencies if there's none in your area of the country.
Perhaps we can put some sort of link or information on the Facebook page about it if people are interested.
Okay. The 4 inherited errors for mental illnesses. And these errors contribute to all different mental illnesses, not just 1 or 2. They're involved in all of the mental disorders because they impact the brain and the central nervous system. Okay.
Well, the first part you answered, which was, do you eat 3 meals a day? So we know that one already.
Okay. Well, I sleep 8 hours
you know what
a
the
night.
next, okay.
I know the next
do
question.
You sleep 7 to 8 hours a night?
I do. And
is it
sound
important?
Is really critical to mental health, and it's critical for other health too, because what happens is while you're sleeping and all of these active systems that we're so busy all day, and being the brain and the stomach and digesting all of this food and processing all this information and running around and keeping the body going and keeping all the systems going. When you go to bed, all that shuts down, and a lot of really interesting things happen while you're sleeping. And it's basically all of the maintenance for the body. It's like the maintenance crew works in to clean up the debris from all of that day of rushing around, all of the stuff that you ate and then the body had to process, and there's a lot of waste involved in that. And so nighttime and when you're sleeping, and it's also when the brain, when the body takes the brain and I'm still not sure that anybody knows exactly how it works, but it consolidates some of your experiences and decides what goes into short-term memory and what goes into long-term memory. And part of what goes into long-term memory is triggered by emotion. You know, if something has a huge emotional impact on you, that goes into long-term memory automatically because it's part of your survival mechanism. If you're being attacked and you ward off the attack, they want you to remember how to do that. So these are primal early systems in humans to help enable survival. So, but sleep is really important to consolidating memories, and deep sleep is important, and I can't tell you all of the details about why. But then the liver cleanses and things, if you go online and you ask what body processes are happening while you sleep, you'll come up to websites that give you timelines of what's happening. And it's like 3 a.m. the small intestine is doing its thing, and after that it's the liver. And so it's really kind of interesting all that your body needs to do, and you need to shut down your brain and your mouth and your digestion, and so that it can go through the cleansing to maintain your health.
Well, when you find out a way to shut my brain and my mouth down, okay. Okay, now do we have time to talk about chelation therapy?
They haven't given us any any time frame. So.
What do you know about EDTA, intravenous chelation therapy, and is it available in the New London area?
Okay,
of Connecticut?
IV chelation comes in other forms. IV chelation is often used to treat cancer patients, to help them detox, to give them feeding of nutrients and things like that. So it's really involved in serious illnesses at that level. You can do chelation, an IV chelation that is claimed to help heart problems. I think what's really going on most of the time is chelation means to claw, and it's used frequently to pull heavy metals or toxins out of the body.
Like mercury? Like
mercury and like lead. And I have elevated levels of lead. I didn't learn that until 2 years ago. I'm working slowly on a book about preventing Alzheimer's, and it's not going to be close, so don't get excited about it because I'm doing shows and doing other things too. But in my research for friends who were experiencing Alzheimer's or dementia or age memory problems, I kept coming across indicators that metals were involved a lot of the time. They're involved not just in Alzheimer's, they're involved in Parkinson's. People with Parkinson's have heavy metals galore. They're involved in lupus, they're involved in multiple sclerosis. They're involved in things that have impaired your nervous system. And Alzheimer's is in that category. So I have a higher risk for Alzheimer's because of the years of anyone who's had major depression for years has a much higher risk of dementia and Alzheimer's. So I thought, well, here I've been trying to help people, friends, treat and find ways of reducing or slowing down Alzheimer's. If I'm going to do prevention, I'm 67 years old, I better get with it or it's going to be too late. So I went to my naturopathic doctor and I said, I want to do Alzheimer's prevention and I want to do chelation. And the naturopathic doctors, as a rule, tend to use natural supplements to do chelation, not IVs. Now that's not cut and dried, but the doctors who normally use IVs for chelation are MDs, and it's a difference in how they're trained. Both are effective and both work. And I went to the Holistic Institute in Florida, Hippocrates Health Institute, and they use IV chelation and nutrient therapy for their cancer patients there. So I have high respect for the effectiveness of their cancer program. So I don't think there's a wrong or a right. I think there's different things to consider when you're doing this. And so I chose to do, first I took a drug, and that was very unusual, DMSA, for the testing of my metals levels. Because I said to the doctor, my naturopath, I said, I want to do chelation, but first I want you to test and see, I know I have probably everybody has high mercury, so I'm sure that that's there, but I want you to do the test and see what else is there. So she said, that's great. Your immune system is still really strong. You're young enough that your systems are strong enough that chelation is hard on the body. So she said, you're still of a right age to be able to do it. First, she had function for testing for my liver function and my kidney function. If you're not able to throw off the toxins, chelation means to claw out and to bring it into circulation. The metals are so toxic that the body stores them. And it stores them in organs and it stores them in the bone. And so they're sequestered and they're not in circulation, so they do less damage there in storage. But in order to get them out, you have to pull them out of storage and put them in circulation. So you need to know that your detoxification systems are functioning at peak performance, or you're going to cause more damage in the body than leaving them in storage. And so she said, when people get too old or if their systems are not working effectively, she does not recommend chelation for that reason. So we did the liver test, the kidney test, my detox systems were fine. So then you take a urine sample, but because these are in storage, you have to give the body something that triggers it to pull the metals out of storage. So you can use supplements, but DMSA is a drug that's been widely used for this purpose, and I knew that it would be stronger than the supplements, and since my system could handle it, I said I would like to do DMSA because I want to have the best reading of having the most in circulation to give it the best indicator I could get. So we did that. And she called me, and she comes from a large family, and I think they're mostly boys, and so she's a pretty fearless woman and never gets upset about anything. She called me on the phone and she said, Gracelyn, I just got your results from your metals test, and she said, your lead levels are off the charts. You're not supposed to have more than 4 units of whatever it is that they use on these tests, and you've got 400. And she said, I can't believe that you function mentally as well as you do, because lead in children reduces their IQ by at least 10 points. So lead is widely known to have a dramatic impact on the intellect and the ability to learn. So then she tested me for without the DMSA to see if it was current intake of lead or if it was only lead that was being pulled out of storage. And I had no lead in my current intake. So that said, and I figured that it was probably, I grew up on my grandparents' farm. My parents inherited it, and they bought it in the 40s, I think. So and my father was a farmer, so there wasn't a lot of money, to totally redo this old house. And it worked, everything worked. But we had an artesian well, which is acidic water, and I'm fairly sure that we had both lead pipes and probably lead solder in between the pipes. And so all that acidic water sitting in the pipes would leach the lead out and put it into the water. And so I'd been drinking leaded water instead of leaded gas for fuel, leaded water all my life. Until I left home and I went away to school at age 13. So, long story short, we started chelation. I used the DMSA for 6 months to pull it. You do DMSA for a day or two, and then at the same time, you're taking supplements that help you, the detoxification systems, process this and throw it off, and then it pulls out not just the bad minerals, but it pulls out the minerals that you need, like copper and zinc and iron. So you have to have supplements that put those back into your system as you continue to keep chelating, so that you don't become mineral deficient, which has its own hazards. So it's a complex problem. You need doctors who are trained in environmental medicine, which naturopathic doctors are. Other doctors tend to go to the American Academy of Environmental Medicine, and so you can go to that website and find doctors who are trained in this chelation process. And it's a slow process. You can't take it out. You can't remove these too rapidly, or you'll damage your kidneys and your liver. So it's the people I've known that have high mercury overload, it took them 3 years to get it out. With me, I became allergic to the DMSA drug after 6 months. So then she made a protocol where we're just using all natural supplements to pull it out more slowly. And I did that for another year. So I've done 18 months of chelation. And then my body, I was having a lot of other things going on in my body, and I thought, I need to just give my body a rest from the chelation and let it rest for 6 months, and then I'll go back and keep pulling the lead out. So it's not a short-term process, but I have the time, the years still, before Alzheimer's strikes, and so hopefully this will help this is to me a big preventative measure, given what I've studied about Alzheimer's.
Definitely, and gives new meaning to get the lead out.
Yes,
it does for sure.
It does, and it's really important if people have multiple sclerosis, lupus, Parkinson's, get the lead out. Go get a test. It's not too late. I mean, these strike people who are in their 50s and 60s that are in otherwise good health, and their nervous system and their begins to degenerate, and so there are a couple of books that I found about. One was by a holistic doctor whose name I can't remember because I found these about 7 years ago for a friend who had lupus. But Google for lupus and holistic treatment or books about that, and you'll find they do exist, and it's quite effective.
Well, let's come to the fun stuff here.
Okay.
Okay, we do know you like tennis. Mm-hmm. So that is something you do for exercise. Is there anything else you like to do?
What do I do? Do I have fun?
Well, they want to know if you can recommend a good suggestion for a girls' night out. So I think everyone's assuming you have fun.
Yep, I do.
Good.
And I have lots of wonderful women friends, you included.
Thank you. And
a
our
woman,
dear
Tracy Boudreau, who's in the studio with us
and
today.
without
who
her, I would not be
introduced us, yes. So,
here. Hey, Trey.
so yes, I do have lots of women friends, and I do have lots of fun in my life. Sometimes in the working years, when you're in your 40s and you're raising your children and you're running a home and you're running a business, you don't have as much time for fun.
No.
But it's still important to give yourself a morning off to recharge your batteries, and I do that. And frequently now, because my son is in his late 30s, and so there's no,
Need for mommy.
yeah, I've done that, been there, done. I'm on vacation from that, sort of. But anyways, I play tennis 3 days a week for an hour and a half. That's my aerobic exercise, and I love tennis, so I don't dread going to exercise. In the wintertime, I do take one of those days and I do yoga, and I try to do yoga 2 days a week, a day on the weekend and one day during the middle of the week, because the stretching and toning, I also feel magnificent when I come out. And both of these I do to take oxygen to my brain too, because I'm so aware of the flow of oxygen is really important for mental health. And so that's one of my mantras is exercise and take oxygen to your brain.
Okay, but where are we going out?
Well, just wait a minute.
Okay.
Don't rush me.
I won't. We'll let Frank do that if he has.
Okay. I like to read. I'm an avid reader, and I read things other than medical books now. And I love to sing. I do that for fun. And what else do I do? Oh, and then I go out with girlfriends for lunch. Usually I try to have lunch with a girlfriend once a week. That's my treat, to stay in touch with my friends, because we're all really busy. And I have friends all over the country, so those that I don't get to go out to lunch with. And when we go to lunch, locally, I like to go to Dog Watch. I like to go to Red 36. I like to go to Breakwater. Sometimes over in the Watch Hill area, I like to go to Longo's, Trattoria, and eat out on the patio. I like outdoor dining in the summertime, so that pulls me to all of those places. And then for girlfriends that are in California that I don't get to see, that I used to work with and know very well, we stay in touch. We call each other, and we have hour-long phone calls, sometimes just around our birthdays, and stay in touch with each other. Sometimes we do a Skype call. But women friends are precious, and I value them, and also they're a source of great fun and support. You know, if you feel lousy, they make you feel good. If you feel good, then you make them feel good if they feel lousy. And so we're a tremendous support system, and I just consider my life would be really dull without my women friends.
Definitely. It's different than our male friends or our spouses. It's
a different
club.
dynamic. They have the good old boys club. We have, I had a friend in England who was really funny, and she said she had formed the Cows Club. Now this, in England, you know, if a woman is not very attractive, they call them cows. And but this stood for Capable Organized Women's Association.
That's better.
And so she took the cows and made it into a positive thing.
Very good.
So I really enjoy women and have lots of women friends, you included.
Why, thank you.
So we haven't got the high sign for 5 minutes yet, so.
Let me see what else. I don't know if Miss Tracy has any questions there.
No, we had some others on that page.
Yes.
Where did
Yes,
that page
we did.
go?
It's
That page.
here.
Okay.
Okay, we've asked you about fun. Supplements for memory loss.
Okay. I what I'm what I suggest people take are antioxidants, because basically what's usually causing a lot of memory loss is a slowing of oxygen to the brain. So exercise is really important. The older you get, the more important it becomes. But I went to a chiropractic neurologist in California in May, and I was out there visiting a woman friend that was having health issues, and I asked him to please check the alignment of my back and tell me what I could do, because chiropractic neurologists there's a wonderful book out by one recently about why isn't my brain working right? And I read that book, and I was so impressed with how they reversed a lot of mental illnesses that was described in that book. And it has probably at least 30 case histories, as well as wonderfully clear explanations of what to do and why. And then it had case histories from doctors all over the country. And I was headed to Santa Rosa, California, because I used to work in wine country. And there was a doctor in Santa Rosa. So I thought, hey, I couldn't find one in Connecticut. So I phoned him up and I said, I'd like to do a 1-hour consultation with you about what I can do to prevent Alzheimer's. And so I started that process. In addition to the chelation, what comes next. And so I would recommend that book to people, because it lists all of the supplements, and it tells you why you're using them. It gives case histories that are fascinating, and they are able to reverse cases of, okay, here's the 5-minute warning, the cases of people who are severely impaired mentally, and they're able to reverse it by figuring out the causes and giving them physical exercises to do. I was given physical exercises that they can identify through asking questions and doing testing which parts of your brain are running slower than the other parts of your brain. And so then they'll give you physical exercises to speed up that part of the brain. And so it's a process, again, of going to somebody who's studied this in depth and to combine the chiropractic knowledge of the body and which parts of the body are driven and directed by which parts of the brain, and then the neurologist study about the nervous system and how the brain and the body interconnect and interact. And what he told me is that 90% of the oxygen to your brain goes up through your arteries and your neck. So if you have problems with arterial plaque, then you're going to have problems with thinking and slowed memory and dementia and all of that kind of thing. The other thing to say about supplements for dementia is vitamin B12 is really important to the brain function. And as we age, B12 comes into the body through the yolk of eggs. So it's important to eat eggs, and they are healthy despite what some people have been claimed for years. They're now coming back to, oh yes, egg is in fact the perfect protein. But if you eat them easy over and the yolk is soft, you get your vitamin B12 in an egg.
That's
and
excellent.
And B12 comes mainly in meats. So particularly for vegans and vegetarians, it's really hard to get adequate B12, and their brain function suffers from that. So they need to take supplements that you chew up, and they enter your body through the mucous membranes of your mouth, because sometimes as you age, when you take B12 in an egg or as a supplement that you swallow, you need your body needs to produce something called intrinsic factor in digestion to process the B12. And when you're younger, that sort of happens usually normally. But as you age, it stops producing it. So you can be taking B12 in a healthy diet, but not being able to have the body have access to it. And my father started having mini strokes, and they didn't discover it until it was obvious that he was losing his cognitive function. And then they tested him, and his B12 levels were really depleted. So they gave him B12 shots, but they couldn't bring back the part of the brain that had been damaged by the strokes. So I encourage people who are older, who have digestive problems, who are vegan or vegetarian, do take vitamin B12 in tablets that you chew up and hold under your tongue and let that go through your mucous membranes, not your digestive system, and then it gets into your system.
What about the shots of
B12 shots, if you're low and if you've had a mini stroke or having strokes or concerned about it, get your B12 levels tested. There's only one test that's particularly accurate. I can't tell you the name of it now, but we can put it up on Facebook. B12 testing. And then they can get shots and bring your B12 levels up quickly. Some people are so depleted that the doctors teach them how to give themselves a B12 shot every day, and that can help prevent future strokes and dementia. So it's a combination of knowing what supplements to take, and that would be different for each person because you're solving deficiencies, but it's also some that are specific for mental cognitive function, and that would be in this book, Why Isn't My Brain Working Right? Since my book's a long way off, get this one. It's daunting. It's 500 pages, but it's so well written you can pick and choose what you read, and it has wonderful case histories that make it. It's an easy read, it's beautifully written, and it's fascinating.
And the author is?
I can't tell you his name.
Okay, but the name of the book
because
again.
It's a name that's not easy to remember. So we'll put that up on there too.
Facebook page, definitely.
Okay. And thank you for coming and asking me all these questions. It's great fun, challenging my brain. I hope I'm growing new synapses. And I hope you'll join us next Wednesday night at 7 o'clock.